This episode of the CUInsight Experience is brought to you by Humanidei. Humanidei helps credit unions build inclusive cultures that attract, develop, and retain talent. Welcome to episode 128 of the show. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and I'm excited to have you here today. This show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders of the credit union movement who make it great. Today, I get to have a conversation with Mike Valentine. Mike is the president and CEO of one of the fastest growing credit unions in the country, BCU in Illinois. So let's just jump into this conversation. Mike, welcome to the show.
Randy, happy to be here, my friend.
I've been looking forward to this. And I'll be honest, so much of the show is just scratch my own itch questions, as there were so many that I wanted to ask you around leadership. And we're going to get into that because you're somebody that I've gotten to know a little bit over the years. But whenever I've talked to people, they talk about you as a leader. So I think people are going to be excited to have this on here. So.
Oh, thanks. I'd love to be a part of it.
This is awesome. I'd like to start with a little bit of the backstory. I mean, if I remember correctly from a little bit of research that I did, 38 years at BCU. So, how'd you get that start in your career and to where, you are today?
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you look back at that, Randy, and you think of this world, with all of us with kids and now grandkids, you go, wow, 38 years at one place. Are you nuts? And I will be honest with you, when I started 38 years ago, didn't think this is where I would finish my career is there. But I started with household finance in a manager training program for 3 years. And the gentleman that hired me is a legend in the credit union industry, Rex Johnson. Rex was a great, great mentor of mine. And I'll never forget my interview, Randy. It's kind of suicide now. And I think of it. And I think of Jill, Humanidei, and what they're doing with recruiting. When you think of this, Randy, they always have that question. They go, well, what's on your mind, Mike? What questions do you have? And this is Rex, asking me this. I don't know what got into me that day because I'm not that guy. And I go, well, Rex, what are your plans? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, I'd like your job someday. And I'm just wondering, how long do you think you'll be around? And my God, Randy, thank God Rex had a sense of humor. Thank God Rex never took himself seriously. And here I am, which is kind of exciting.
How old were you at that time?
I was 25 years old.
I love it. That's awesome. When somebody walks into your office now with maybe an expectation of maybe they've more than they've earned at this point, you can kind of look back to yourself and be like, hey, I asked those questions too, or had those expectations.
Exactly. That's awesome. And that's what makes it fun, Randy. It's like, hey, been there.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Do you remember the first time? I think we all laugh about this because we've heard all the different misconceptions of what a credit union is over the years. But do you remember the first time for yourself where you heard about credit unions or knew what one was?
Yeah, it was funny, Randy, again. And I love these kind of discussions because we can be real with each other. I had to research it before I went to the interview, because I'm like, credit union, why is Travanos have a credit union? What's a credit union? And it was so cool once I did my research because remember at household finance at the time, I was selling 38% interest rate loans to people that probably didn't qualify. And I was selling insurance because they were big on selling insurance on all their products. So to be successful there, you had to have high insurance numbers and be able to make loans. So when I went over to Baxter, to BCU, at that time, Randy, they were selling 13% interest. So as a sales guy, I'm like, man, I can do this all day long. I love this job.
So you came up from the sales side of things, the customer
Yes.
service and sales. Okay. Yeah. The same with me. It's funny you say that. I've probably mentioned it on the show before, but I grew up in Metro Detroit. So everybody's perception there was that credit unions had something to do with the auto union, right? Like you had to be a union member to be a credit union member, right? So
Absolutely.
Let's talk credit unions a little bit. And I was excited about this. I know you're on the board of CUNA Mutual Group. And I remember if I remember correctly, you were at PSCU on the board there too. So involved very much in our system nationally. Beyond, the four walls of BCU, what are you most excited about for credit unions right now? And is there something that you think, quite honestly, all credit unions need to be thinking about at this point in time?
Randy, that's a great question. And as I reflect and think about it, and it's kind of been my passion, is connecting with partners, and business partners of BCU And that's what got me close to PSCU and their journey. Because I kind of feel if you're going to work with them and partner with them, then get involved, speak up, and if you can get into a position of leadership, which, on the PSCU board, I tell you what, I cherish, I think it was close to 15 years. And I have nothing but high things to say about that board, about Chuck Fagan and what they're doing. And for me, it kind of moved to CUNY Mutual with what I'm doing right now and working with Bob Trunzo and their board, because I just don't think you can be halfway in anything, Randy. I think if you're in, you got to be passionate about it and you got to work with your partners, because you talk about where our future's going and what we're going to be doing. We have got to partner with fantastic partners that are going to help us get there, because we can't do it by ourselves. So we need the CUNY Mutuals, the PSCUs, the world, the Jack Henrys, the Lumens, the Alchemies, all these people to help, because we can't do it by ourselves, Randy. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So how do you leverage that? And how do you get better at it? It's collaboration. We just got to get better at it, Randy. And we should be, because we're credit unions. We should be doing this.
This should be our natural instinct. Was that something, I guess, you were always involved with, or you saw that connection throughout your career? Or has it been something that, as you went along, has grown more for you?
Randy, I think that one's probably learned. And I would take that from Rex Johnson and my training with Rex. One of the things we started, and gosh, Randy, this would have been the late 80s. We're a small credit union, maybe $60, $70 million in assets. And we decided, as an organization, we called it a business partner day. And so what we did, Randy, which was blasphemy in the world we're in today, we invited all our business partners in the BCU to go over BCU strategy for the year. And what we would do would be, we would award business partners, for their work with us and what we did with them, and we call them out. So it got to a point, Randy, which is pretty cool. You got the business partners trying to be really good with BCU and work with us and build business and give us good deals, because they want to be recognized by BCU as a great business partner for us. So that started the early days, and we would do this annually. But what was really cool about it is you got connected with them, because a lot of times I feel for business partners, they don't know your strategy, Randy. They come in and, all right, I'm going to help you with loans. Yeah, but did you know we're really trying to drive mortgage business this year? And did you know we're really trying to get out to this new market that we're getting to? And it really kind of, to me, brought it all together. And now, in a very small way, we do this individually with our key partners. For us, it's CUNY Mutual, it's PSCU, it's Jack Henry, it's Lumen. As we sit down and start talking with them, is here's what we're trying to do this year. How can you help us get there? What do we need to do together? And I think it helps. And I think credit unions need to do more of this.
So you're bringing them into your strategic plan, so they're not just selling you what they have off the rack, quite honestly, right? So it's pretty cool. One of the things I love about hosting this podcast is, just picking people's brains. I heard a question it was over the holidays, actually, and I absolutely loved it, so I added it this year. And it was that idea of, like, what's that greatest investment that you've made, that you look back and you're like, you made in your career? And I give the example, Warren Buffett said it was a Dale Carnegie course.
Randy, it's funny. I have two good stories with it. One of it is an MBA, and I'll never forget the other thing I did on that famous interview with Rex to get the job. And when I asked him about his job, he asked me, he goes, hey, what are your plans for education? And I said, what do you mean, Rex? He goes, well, are you going to get an MBA? And I said, absolutely. Randy, never thought of getting an MBA at all, but I was a sales guy. I'll get an MBA. And I got to tell you, Rex was really a developer of talent. 1 year to my anniversary, Randy, he comes over to my cubicle. He leans over the cubicle and he goes, hey, Mike, he goes, I've not written any letters of recommendations yet for your MBA. Are they coming? I'm like, oh God, I scrambled, within a month, I got my applications in and you know what? I really appreciate him staying with that, because it's not the piece of paper, Randy. It's the education. It's the learning you go through and thought processes. And by the way, working with teams, that's just fantastic. That's so helpful for you.
Okay. So this scratch my own itch. You mentioned at the time when you started with the credit union, it was a $60 million credit union. Now you're $3 billion plus, I believe. my guess is at 60 million, you didn't have nearly as many employees. So kind of easier to probably just pop over a cube and be like, hey, wait a minute, Mike hasn't got his MBA yet. He told me he was going to. That to me, I guess even we are nowhere near the size employees wise at CUInsight, right? But like with growth of employees, like that struggle to stay connected when maybe you were smaller. How do you do that? What's the hack? What's the...
Oh my God. So it's so funny when you think of that, Randy. So you think of that day and you look at, when we started and there was 20 of us, at the credit union, you could have a holiday party at your house. Now we're knocking on almost 900 employees.
Wow.
And, when you're right, 60 million, now we're 5 billion.
5 billion. Sorry, I undershot by a couple billion.
Oh, no, that's fine. And I tell you, Randy, this is what bothers me more than ever for my style of leadership. And it was the style that I grew up in. It's that family, that connection. I pride myself on, your employee's name, their kid's name, their spouse's name, grandparents. I mean, you could do that in a small thing. Guess what, Randy? At 800 people, it's mind-boggling. And it kills me when we can walk through our hallways of work and not know, hey, there's Randy, hey, there's Mike, and all that. So it's really difficult, but it's that evolution of growth of what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. I remember in the first season when Chuck Fagan was on, he was talking about that too, because he had made you were there at the time, at BCU when he went from Qs to PSCU, and that idea of like going from 50 employees to 2,500 and, still wanting to stay connected to new hires and the orientation process and things. It was amazing. That to me is so interesting. Being able to keep that culture and that connection over time as the credit union has grown, as the teams have grown. And now I think about it even more. I haven't seen you in a couple of years. We've seen each other through Zooms a few times, but how do you keep that connection with a more remote workforce? So not only large, but a lot more remote than credit unions ever were in the past.
Well, Randy, so here's a little compliment for you, buddy. And you in the early days of COVID, you got to remember this. You used to fire out those, I think you had happy hours.
Yeah, Jill and I.
Yeah, Jill and you. And I got to tell you, it was like really kind of a message to me, like connecting. And you know what? You may have, as a person sitting there, might not have said much, but you're able to see people, listen to some other issues, kind of listen to that. So tearing that out of your playbook, Randy, for you and Jill, I started sitting down with my group, because I'm a open door, kind of walk around. I purposely keep my calendar mostly open all the time, Randy, in the pre-COVID. Well, guess what? There's no walking around in my sunroom, my house, so I started to schedule with employees a half-hour time slots. And so what I was trying to do was meet with, obviously, my team. I was meeting with weekly, but the SMT, which is the VP level, I was meeting with monthly, and then the director level every other month, and managers every 3 months. But it was kind of a cadence, Randy, that it sounds kind of weird, but all of a sudden, and you know how this works in management, Randy, all of a sudden my direct report started doing it. And then it cascaded throughout that, hey, guess what? We're not getting as much of a chance to talk. And guess what, Randy? I wouldn't talk business the whole time. A lot of time was, how's it going? What are you up to? Hey, I talk about your trip you guys just took. Anything like that, Randy, it just makes it different for them. It felt like you're connecting with them.
What you said there is there's something I love, because if the CEO has the time to do it, everybody should have, you know what I mean? Like the rest of the organization probably looks at me and says, okay, I could do that as well. You mentioned those kind of happy hours that we were doing through some of the pandemic. There were a lot of times there that the conversation had nothing to do with credit unions, right? It was just connecting again. So
that's what makes it fun though, right? I mean, that's what makes it interesting.
This is and hopefully I won't get you in trouble with Jill or anything on this one, but because, she's the pro in this. But when you're building a team or when you're bringing on a new team member, a direct report for you, what are you looking for? What are those characteristics that go into your decision-making process? And is there something that just turns you off instantly where you're like, it's not going to work?
It's usually never hiring, where you say, I need technical knowledge, Randy. I'm hiring people, and for me, can I connect? What does that look like? And can I connect? And BCU is such a relationship company that it's so important the how you do things, and I have to tell you, Randy, if you're arrogant you got a little edge, you don't do well. And, I'd like to say that makes sense for us, but it does in our business because our people, what you're really looking for, you're really hiring attitude, and you want that attitude, that the people want to make difference out there, want to do something different. They're employee focused, member focused. You get me that, Randy, I can teach you most other things, that we're looking for like that. And that's what I look for is how we can connect like that.
Let me ask you this. You form these relationships. I'm sure there's folks that have been with you for many years. How do you give feedback? Someone disappoints, let's just say, disappoints you in something that they did. How do you give that feedback? We don't need to call anybody out, but you know what I mean? Like, how do you give the feedback? And, can you think of a situation and how it worked out or turned out?
Yeah, I tell you, there's so many. One of the things that I'm most excited about, and some people get upset, Randy, when you say, people left you, people went on. Well, out of BCU, I don't know, there's 10 to 15 people that have left to be CEOs. One of them, a good friend of yours and mine, Johnny Bratsakis. I call him the Greek. And Johnny and I had a great relationship. And he was one that was super good at the relationship side. And there was also moments where you had to have the hard feedback, and I'll never forget it with John. John and I know he's okay with talking about this because it's Johnny. Sure. But, it's just always, I never forget John in one of our reviews. He's like, Mike, you keep telling me all these great things and positive things. I appreciate it. But what do I got to work on? And that was a real epiphany for me, Randy, to go, because I'm a good news guy. So, and then I'm kind of like, well, gosh, I better start delivering some of these other things I want to see him doing and working on and all that. And it really kind of turned my mind a lot, Randy, that, you want to share. It's easy to share the good news. It's not so easy to share the bad news, but the bad news is what's going to help people grow. So then it got a little easier to do it, but it's important.
So is that something you've had to work on? It wasn't a natural.
That was not, Randy, that does not come easy for me. I'm a good news guy.
That was a challenge for me as well. I love giving the good news. I tended to let the bad news go until I was pulling my hair out and it almost made it worse, right? And my reaction was sometimes not that great either. You just mentioned John Bratsakis, and there's others who have been on your team underneath you, or you've brought along that are, to say, the Bill Belichick coaching tree, right? Like it's pretty impressive. What do you see, as people are coming along that makes that good CEO? And what's your mindset also? Because I think sometimes people struggle with the idea of you don't want to lose all your best employees to become CEOs, but it says something about you that so many have.
Yeah. People ask me this all the time, Randy, and I do mean it because it's happening to me. I like to hire people better than me. I like to hire people that I say, boy, this person could really go out and knock them dead. I think of Bob McKay. He's a Together credit union, and Bob and I were together. Gosh, we were together close to 15, 16 years. No, maybe it's closer to 20. He'll probably get mad at that. But what was fun with that was you also grow to be great friends. And you also grow to go, hey, I know you most likely won't get my job because I probably am going to retire and you may not be the right person. And then it got to be a point with, gosh, Bob, go do something out there. And it's so rewarding, Randy, to see people go out and do well like that. I just can't explain. You think about like raising a kid and letting them go. It's even better, this stuff, because now the conversations are robust, Randy. I remember Bob's first board meeting, and he goes, wow, dealing with a board of directors. Yeah, get used to it, buddy. It's not easy. You think this job is easy. This job is difficult when you're dealing with 11 bosses.
Okay, I have to go there then. The notes I sent over to you, you knew this was coming, but I was excited to ask this. That is, from conversations that I've had over the years, one of the surprises, no matter how much, say if you're an SVP in the credit union and you go to board meetings, like until you become the CEO, to truly understand that board relationship. So for like Bob, if you got that one piece of advice for a new CEO on board relations, what is it?
Boy, my biggest thing, and what Bob and I talk about, listen and read the room. You got to read the room. And guess what? Don't go in and make a bunch of changes in your first month on the job. Get an understanding. Now, I believe in change. Don't get me wrong there, Randy. But don't forget, you just don't want to irritate them all with, wow, I'm going to change. And remember, they've been there for years. You're going to say, what you've been doing isn't so good. I'm going to do this versus, hey, let me understand it. Let's see if we can start changing this. So I would say, listen, read the room and understand what their hot issues are as they look at that and start taking them one at a time. Rome's not built overnight. It's going to take time, for people to do this.
Have you, and I'm sure you have, whether it's you as the CEO or maybe it's a fellow board member, I'm assuming it's not you, but where you run into that person who thinks they have all the answers and you have to work with them. I feel like from conversations in the past, sometimes new CEOs struggle with not trying to rock the boat or a squeaky wheel gets more attention, right? Any thoughts there?
Oh my gosh. I tell you, Randy, this is where in our industry, what's so much fun, and we talk about my board work with PSU and CUInsight. I've got a PhD because you got to see both sides of these things to understand how a board really works. But you also got to understand that board member that does have all the answers. I call it, and you're too young for it. I think it was Welcome Back, Kotter Horseshack. He used to raise his hand in the beginning. You get board members who just want to be that first person to listen and talk and in that. And there's a good friend of mine, Jeff March. He's at Citadel Credit Union, great buddy of mine. And I watched him on PSU, and boy, was he cool. You couldn't rattle him. He'd listen. And in my early days, I was that guy like, oh, I got an answer. They're asking me. And then finally you learn they're not asking you. They're trying to get others to talk. It shouldn't be always you. So you just got to be able to read that. But you also, as a board member, you got to police it yourself, Randy. I've started to learn that now. And I was fortunate to be chairman of PSU. I'm chairman of CUInsight right now. We have fantastic directors at CUInsight. And there always is these hard conversations. You have it at work. You have it on boards, and you got to do that because a job of a board, what do they say? Fingers out, nose in, and you just got to live by that, and it helps a lot when you have that experience, Randy, that you can go, oh boy, I didn't like how it happened. And by the way, I've misstepped so many times in my life that I've learned from.
We hope to learn from those.
Yes.
Right? So, I'd kind of like to get back to the growth side of things for a minute before we start to get towards the end. We talk about the growth, $5 billion. It's absolutely amazing. How do you keep that growth going? Often, sometimes I don't want to say idea flow, but as we get bigger, we maybe become a little less risk averse. We get stuck into this is what got us here. I think we saw it a lot over the last 2 years. Credit unions have the ability to pivot very well. The important thing is making sure it's the good pivot. It's the right choice that we're making. Any thoughts on that? And then on the flip side, I've told the story many times on the show, which was a big learning thing for me. How do you kill that idea that you thought was great, but just wasn't? Like it wasn't necessary,
Oh my God, Randy. Well, there's a lot packed in that. And I would say, and this has kind of been my belief because who I am, growth is opportunity. Growth is good. And you do get some people with that mindset, I look at credit unions out there and I look at the credit unions. I've seen credit unions for 5 or 6 years with no growth. And I got to tell you, this sounds terrible. You're dying. You're rotten. And to me, if you're not growing, you've got to be looking at these new things you're doing. And with growth comes opportunity to hire good people, because I think it all comes around our people, our employees. If we get the right employees intact, it takes care of the rest. And I got to tell you, Randy, you and I aren't going to go to work for the credit union that's had zero growth for the last 7 years, and say, hey, can you guys get this thing going versus we're growing, 12 to 16% a year. Hey, I want to be a part of that. That's growth. That's exciting because you're doing new things. You're trying new things. You're getting into new things. It's important.
What do you think working at a credit union looks like down the road? I mean, we've really seen a lot of change. I know on the calls you were mentioning, I remember fairly early on, James Wildman up in Alaska was all excited because with the remote work, he's like, I don't have to get people to move to Alaska. So, I mean, what do you, to get people excited to come work for our industry, our movement, what does the future of, careers in credit unions look like?
I think they got to see opportunity, Randy, which I think we can show them in a lot of what we're doing. But I also think they've got to see flexibility, more so than I've ever seen in my career. I had a discussion with I mentor some of the different talent at BCU. And this was a young person just in their first job. And they're like, how do I catch on to this thing. What does it look like in my old days, Randy, and your days? Well, you know what? I'm going to get in at 6 o'clock and I'm going to be there till 7 o'clock. And through the weekends, what keywords I said, you're going into work every day. And today's world, I'm probably working more hours, in a flex type thing, but I'm liking it. I cut out a commute, sometimes, and I try to get into work 3 to 4 days a week, which is still a lot, but 3 to 4 days a week, because I still believe in that people thing. And what I've got to get by, Randy, as a relationship guy, I got to let it go and say, this virtual world is here to stay. We've got to start looking at that. And I think the digital side of this, when you think of how we do business, BCU, we have over 65 offices inside companies that we serve. And guess what, Randy? The companies aren't coming back. So what do we need to do with that? How do we flex that and turn that from maybe it was a person doing transactions to a person doing relationships now? Maybe they're more advising on wealth management or sitting down talking about a mortgage, an investment. So it's a pivot that we've got to make. But I got to tell you, Randy, I am so excited, so nervous about that because it's going to change. It's going to rock our world, as you kind of go forward. But that's exciting to me. That's what draws me and draws some of the young talent that's out there into the credit union side.
I think, like you, I like a little bit of nervousness. I think I perform better. So I have to ask, this really doesn't go with this, but how does the person just out of college get the CEO as the mentor?
Well, it's funny. So in our credit union, we have a mentoring program and you sign up for it. And some of it's kind of a blind draw, Randy. Well, I got to preface it to you too, my friend. He's also was my caddy. He was an Evans Scholar. And I don't know how much you know about him.
I just watched on the airplane in the past week, a whole thing on the Evans Scholarship. Yeah, and caddyship. Yeah.
Will, through the years as a caddy, I got to know him. And then he started as an intern. And then he started his career. And it was really kind of exciting because for me, I'm used to, a lot of people get afraid. They go, I don't want the CEO as my mentor. Then you got the climbers. You love this, Randy. The ones that really want to climb go, oh, I'm going to get the CEO because that'll get me the job, Right. And sometimes it's difficult because you got to still give really good feedback to these people because Rome's not built overnight. But you're also kind of playing chess with them with what happens. And for me, it's been really neat to see my son is in the credit union space and he's with consumers. So as I watched that, and David and I have a great relationship with this, but what's so funny with this, Randy, my calls with David used to be ESPN, the Bears, the Cubs, the Blackhawks. Well, guess what, Randy? Game on now, because now we're talking about loan losses and net promoter. And Dad, what are you doing with this? And all of a sudden, Randy, I'm like, I got to focus here, man.
You're like, I just want to watch the Bears game.
Yeah, exactly. I like our old days, but it is so refreshing to see that because that's what we need in our industry, Randy, is that youth coming in to help push us.
I think that's amazing, having the mentoring program. You mentioned Rex growing up. Other mentors in your life? Or
Yeah, Rex was obviously my first. And the other one, and I lost my brother to cancer 4 years ago, but he was a business for self guy, didn't go to college. We were 3 years apart. But to watch him build a business on his own, and we used to talk, Randy, all the time. And one of our discussions used to be, he and his wife, Sue, owned this business. And it was a great prospering business. Still prospering, by the way, with Sue, who's done a great job with it. But they never had a board, Randy. When they wanted to do something, the two of them talked. And I used to sit there and I used to go, God, I got to get 12 people on board to do this. I'm not running my company. Sure, I'm the CEO, but you also saw what a difference that was and what type of command and control that was. And it was really kind of neat for me to reflect on that and go, all right, well, I picked this, and here's why. But there's so many learnings you get from not having your own money in it, Randy, and what I saw in that versus decisions I would make. I might be a little more cavalier with, yeah, we're going to do this. Well, it's not my money, versus he would go, I got to buy a truck. I'm like, well, why don't you just buy a truck? It's like, well, no, I got to pay for the truck. It's hard. It's people like that. Vern Laux was the CEO of Baxter Healthcare, and Vern, CEO of a Fortune 50 company, and he and I got really close. And it was really fun because one of the life lessons that Vern taught me was surround yourself with people that complement you. In other words, Randy, for me, I'm a salesperson. I'm more of a lending kind of guy. I want to find really good finance people, really good people person. I don't want all Mikes around me. I want different people and Randy, this is hard because I think there's a lot of us out there that line that up. And I guess what? If we both agree, I don't need you. I need that pushback of other people thinking about that. So I think that's important.
That was something when we were hiring our first CEO and Jill was working with us, right? And hiring Lauren. It was realizing the one thing we didn't need was another me.
Yeah.
We already had that. I took it where it could go. We needed something better or something different, let's just say. But so, yeah, that's an interesting one to learn. It's sometimes a little tough. Okay, so it wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience without a few rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid. Your answers don't have to be. When was the last time you were amazed, either personally or professionally?
I was amazed. So it's a personal. Last Saturday, my daughter had a baby boy, and they named it Michael Joshua. So I didn't see this coming. Of course, my wife knew. And I got to tell you, I cried like a baby, Randy. It's just neat to see someone come into the world, but then you see your namesake. And he also has my daughter's cousin passed away, and Josh is that name. So to put a name together like that, Randy, oh my God, dude. It was a rough Saturday night.
But that is amazing.
That's amazing.
I love that answer. So I found myself in others. I think, we've all talked about this before where sometimes, and you mentioned this earlier, that you might be working more now. You're enjoying it. But with that flexibility, you're kind of working more now. Oftentimes, like in that leadership role where you kind of get consumed by, the business that you're running, that can be a detriment to other things in life, family, things like that, relationships. What have you lived and learned over the years to create that balance in those relationships for you?
Boy, that's a great one, Randy. As I think about it, I probably have to say, so 38 years of BCU, going on 41 years of marriage, and it's communication, and you got to have that partner that's side by side, Randy, that believes in what you're both doing and the greater cause. Because my wife made a lot of sacrifices. She's a stay-at-home mom. And to watch what we were able to do together, from me working my MBA and night school, all those things, having 3 wonderful kids, 4 great grandkids, it's hard, and I could focus on some and she could focus on the other, but you still had a passion for what you did and a passion, for raising your kid and trying to create that environment for everybody. So to me, I would say it really goes back to that.
What's the best piece of advice you ever received, and who gave it to you?
Oh my God. It's interesting. So I go back to Rex, never take yourself seriously, but take your job seriously and learn to laugh, because if you can't laugh at it, Randy, you got to stop. And the other thing that we used to talk about a lot was you got to have fun. If you're not having fun, Randy, like you can just tell you love what you do. You have a passion for this thing, dude. So to me, it's fun to watch that because it's electric, right? And why do you not want to be in something that you're not having a good time with or have a passion or fun for? So
I couldn't agree more. So I dig this idea, and that kind of goes into what you're talking about of having like more of a mission than say a job. Do you have a personal mission statement?
Boy, I tell you, I was fortunate enough, Randy, and this is my own plug. This has nothing to do with you, my friend Randy or Jill. I did some work with Humanidei and the DE&I, and it's eye-opening, Randy. When you see your own organization through another lens, and remember, my friend, 38 years, I know where everything is. People say there's no bodies buried, but I know where all the crazy, whatever BCU was and is. And it's a learning experience, and I want to get better. And it was really eye-opening. Humanidei did a great job with focus groups, looking for themes, looking for things that we can do. And as I think of a person more towards the end of my career than the beginning of my career, yeah, I'm proud of the fastest growing credit union. We're $5 billion in assets. We're well run. We have, good capital. But I also want to be known for its talent, which we talked about, but also for our diversity and inclusion and equity. What are we doing in that area, Randy? How serious are we about this? And do we really want to make a difference out there? And I tell you what, Randy, it all comes back to me. And I thank Jill and her crew for opening our eyes. And I'm really excited about this year because some people say, are you doing it to do it? Check a box. No, this is a journey, Randy. This is something that I'm getting passionate about because I believe it relates to our employees. And I go back to my original statement. Happy employees, engaged employees will do well for you. This is part of it that I think is the missing link for me, is to get better at it. So we're on this journey, my friend, and stay tuned. We'll see what happens in the next 12 to 18 months as we go through this.
I've been on that journey as well with you at home. So I've learned so much over the past few years. So,
I get it.
And at times, I was a little ashamed that I needed to learn it. So
that's a true statement, bud.
Absolutely.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. An easy one, or the toughest question, depending on who I'm asking. What's the greatest album of all time? That one you could listen to front to back.
Oh my God. So I'm a huge Beatles fan. Okay. So would it be the White Album? That gets controversy. Probably that if I'm thinking about it.
That has been mentioned before. That's obviously always a good choice on that one. What are you currently reading? And is there a book that you've gifted people or you think everybody should read?
It's Financial Wellbeing. It's at the office. I'll note you to it. Financial well-being, because what we're really focused on at BCU also is our financial well-being. So as you know, we partner with companies out there and they're always looking for financial health. And what are we doing in that area? So I'm super excited to be getting more involved in that as we kind of go through it. But it's a neat read on what people are looking for. But it's really across America, though, Randy. Like, when you think some people, 80% of Americans can't come up with $500 emergency, what are we doing, in that? In credit unions, we can play a role here, man. This is our sweet spot. So how can we remember that as we do that? But I'll send you it's Financial Wellbeing, but I'll send you the title.
We'll link to that in the show notes for sure. When you hear the word success, who's the first person that comes to mind and why? Wow.
I tell you, when I think of success, and I'm a little bit biased on this, I think of Bob Trunzo, what he's done at CUNA Mutual. He took over for Jeff Post, who did a really good job. And he's really putting CUNA Mutual in a whole different stratosphere. And his commitment to the industry is unparalleled because being on the board is different from being a partner to him. I'm both to him, but it's really fun to watch the growth, and it's fun to watch his people and what he's done with it and what he does for the industry. So really, when I define success, I think of Bob.
That's awesome. When he was on the show, I loved that conversation. So there you go, Mike. That was it. Before we go, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule to come on and have the conversation with me. I greatly appreciate it. If people want to get a hold of you, if they have additional questions, what's your poison? What's the best way to find you?
Oh, man. Email, call, text. Randy, I'm wide open, buddy. I'm like you, baby. I'm an open book.
I love it. Well, we will put the email out there so people can. Any final thoughts or asks you have of the listeners?
Yeah, I would say this is so important for, and you might say, boy, this is 30, 40 minutes. And if you take one good nugget out of it, that's awesome. My other thing, Randy, keep it up. Keep the passion. I know there's a number of people that are out there that, there's so much to hear from. And it's even the ones that you might say you think are successful, but it's others, small, big, large. Man, we can learn something from anybody out there. So, Randy, keep it up.
Oh, I appreciate that, my friend. Just a few quick notes before we go. First, we'll link to everything that Mike and I talked about today in the show notes. Make sure to check out Humanidei. We appreciate their sponsorship. They allow me to do what I do, so I get to have this much fun doing it. Also, please make sure to subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all, and if you're feeling it in you, give us a 5-star review. It helps with the visibility of the show. If If you don't think we're worth the 5 stars, just forget I asked. And if you're looking for your next read, a book mentioned on the show, a quick Google search of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list will get you out there on its way from Amazon. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for listening today. Y'all rock, and I appreciate the kind words that come in about the show. Be well, friends, and I hope we all get to see each other soon. Have a great day.